Hi, I'm Joe DiMatteo. Thanks for taking a few minutes to watch this video teaching today. How do you spell acid relief? How do you spell heartburn relief? I think that's going to be the focus of our question today. If you watch all the commercials and you watch all the TV segments and all the experts that come on, we constantly blame heartburn, gastroesophageal reflux disorder and disease on too much acid. Well, we're finding that it's not just a situation or a complaint of the elderly or the middle-aged. We find today it's teens, 20-somethings with heartburn, with gastroesophageal reflux disease, hospital visits, physician visits, scopes, endoscopies being done to elucidate what the problem is. If we really look at it, what we've done over the course of years is we've defined this as being always, in all cases, for everybody, an excess acid productive issue. Is that really the case? Now, certainly there is too much acid in many cases. There are disease states, one known as Zollinger-Edison syndrome, where there's a hypersecretory syndrome, meaning you're just pouring out hydrochloric acid. Major issues, we need to be able to try to suppress acid. What I want to focus on today is it really, how do you spell it? Is it really too much acid, or is it a symptom of poor digestion and other factors? That's what I want to help you with today. So if you have heartburn, gastroesophageal reflux disease, you have distension and difficulties after meals, we want to help you to complementarily be able to deal with your situation. This certainly is not the substitute for a medical visit or to substitute for your medical doctor's advice. This is to help you functionally try to obtain some relief. So let's just talk about it. Is it really a disease or is it a dysfunction? We call it gastroesophageal reflux disease. I take exception to that. I don't know that I really call it a disease. I call it more dysfunction, not disease, dysfunction. What are some of the downsides of the approaches today in dealing with this disorder? The downsides of the pharmacologic aspects, pharmaceuticals. Well, we know the acid blockers, once you start to use them, you're pretty much locked into using them. What do I mean by that? You actually will have a rebound reaction when you stop using the medication. Your response might be, or if you're a medical practitioner, well, of course you're going to have a rebound reaction because you have too much acid. Not really. Studies have been done where they have documented that patients with no heartburn, no gastroesophageal reflux disease, put them on very powerful acid-blocking pharmaceuticals known as proton pump inhibitors, PPIs, drugs like Nexium, Prevacid, Acifex, and so on. For 6 weeks, no symptoms, mind you, 6 weeks, put them on the medication. After that 6 weeks, abruptly withdraw them. 40%, 4 out of 10, began to experience heartburn and acid production type symptoms when they had no symptoms before. We cannot, across the board, suppress acid, which is a very, very important physiologic component to digestion, keeping the gut clean, keeping the intestinal tract healthy, and aiding your digestive process. It is physiologically incorrect to completely suppress that aspect of your digestive capacities. So let's just talk about some of the downsides. Number one, we have low B12 status. Low vitamin B12 associated with long-term use of acid-producing drugs. We know that number two, they're increasing rates of pneumonia risk. Approximately a 30% increased rate of pneumonia, lower respiratory infections in the elderly that chronically use PPIs, proton pump inhibitors. We also know that increasing rates of Clostridia difficile, an infection of the intestinal tract, is at a higher rate. Now, why would bacterial translocation or bacterial infections or pneumonia or clostridial infections of the lower digestive tract become a problem? Because an acid component to the digestive tract helps to keep the intestinal wall and the stomach clean from invading pathogens, etc. That acidic environment kills off fungal, yeast, bacterial, protozoa types of infections, and so on. The other question I have here, if it was disease, why is it that from roughly 1980 and on, instead of esophageal cancer rates going down with the use of acid blocking pharmaceuticals, which is what we would assume was to have happened. Obviously, one of the components and one of the cries in the medical community is, if I have excess acid coming up onto the esophagus, you will eventually develop esophageal cancer. Therefore, we must give you this acid blocking agent. So as opposed to the acidity affecting the esophageal lining and producing cancer, as was we would assume by suppressing it that it would no longer do that, what we found is that if you look at 1990, 2000, 2010, we have a linear progression of esophageal cancer continuing to rise. At the same time, use of proton pump inhibitors, these PPIs, is a steeper ascent than even the rate of esophageal cancer. So if blocking acid were the answer, then why don't we have lowering rates? Why is it that it's not on a descent as opposed to an ascent? New information says that by suppressing digestive acid, now this is tricky, you actually now allow for pancreatic enzymes. So your pancreas is involved. Pancreas produces lipase for fats, amylase for carbohydrates, protease for proteins. So your hydrochloric acid helps to break down and digest proteins, cleave your proteins into amino acids, allow you to convert and produce B12 from intestinal bacteria, not let bad bacteria grow. But now there's a healthy balance between the hydrochloric acid and these pancreatic enzymes. We take away the hydrochloric acid. It's now believed that these pancreatic enzymes are refluxing onto the esophagus and allowing for a rising rate of esophageal cancer. So what's the answer now? Do we suppress pancreatic digestive enzymes? Of course not. That's an absurd concept. Why do we suppress hydrochloric acid? You might be listening and say, but I get relief from it. I understand. I agree. I'm not saying that you're not going to get relief. My argument is it disease, gastroesophageal reflux disease, or is it just dysfunction of your digestive tract? I contend that it's dysfunction. What we've covered, there are so many other issues. Increasing rates of, I believe it's hip fractures. I don't want to misquote. I believe it's increasing rates of hip fractures in women, 25 to 30% increasing rate for folks that use these acid blocking drugs chronically over a long period of time. We also know there's hypomagnesia, there's low calcium, there's low zinc. In other words, poor absorption of minerals. Why? You need the hydrochloric acid. You need the acidic environment to what we call dissociate minerals. It's a fancy way of saying that you can separate them and transport them across the intestinal wall for your body to use. We don't absorb our minerals. We grow more bad bacteria. We have higher rates of fungal infections in the gut. The list goes on. Disease versus dysfunction. I contend dysfunction. What do we do about it? Well, I've taught this on even some previous blogs and some previous teachings. Improve your digestion. Tips for digestion. We talk about this all the time. Chew your food. Number one, chew it well. Do not drink the majority of your fluids with your meals. Drink the majority of your fluids away from your meals between them, and drink 3, 4, or 5 ounces, no more than that, with your meals. Chew well. Drink small amounts of fluid. Do not overeat. Many of us overeat at a meal. We create a tremendous workload on our digestive systems that we should not be doing. So there's ABCs here that we also have to understand regarding even stress. Many of you do not realize that if you're in a stressful environment, or you've had a very stressful day, you've had a very difficult day, you've had a difficult day at work or with your children, the last thing that you should do is come home and eat a big steak. You should actually give yourself a time to unwind. Why is that? High stress produces high cortisol, actually can weaken the barrier function of the intestinal line, lowering what we call secretory IgA. We also know that under high levels of stress, it obviously triggers in our bodies a fight or flight response. That flight or fight response downregulates digestive capacity, meaning that your pancreatic activity reduces. High stress, I don't have adequate digestive enzymes to do what? To digest foods that I assimilate. So high stress leads to many chronic digestive disorders. Again, disease or dysfunction. You can't eat a major meal if you've come through a very difficult and stressful day. Chew your food well, smaller meals, multiple meals. Watch offending and triggering agents, caffeine, chocolate, sugar, many times tomato sauce, tomato-based foods. Orange juice can be a huge, huge trigger. Now, this teaching is not meant to be all-encompassing. It's meant to provoke your thought process here. So we know that we question the long-term use of these pharmaceuticals. I've given you a litany of side effects. There are more. I didn't even touch on all of them. Everything from infections to reduction in bone health in women. Number two, long-term use of these pharmaceuticals lead to other secondary types of components. Mainly, you're almost, I can't use the word addicted to, but you have a rebound reaction. You can't get off of them. So long term, what we want to do is help you improve your digestive process. Basic tips for digestion. Don't eat if you're heavily stressed. Give yourself an hour or so to unwind. Let's get into some more of the practical aspects of what else you can do. Many times what I recommend is a prep for a period of time, GI Restore. A scoop in about 4 ounces of water twice a day on an empty stomach, maybe before breakfast, before dinner, for about 2 weeks. I then have many folks then reduce this to once a day for maybe another 6 weeks. What does it have? It has aloe concentrates, deglycerized licorice, arabinogalactanes that help and aid the digestive process and adherence to the gastrointestinal wall. Zinc carnosine, who the Japanese studied 15 years ago in improving everything from irritable bowel, heartburn, and gastroenteritis or gastritis types of situations. Zinc carnosine combinations. Glutamine has glutamine in it, which helps repair the lining of the intestinal tract. So you've got a very much of a kind of a supportive type of prep to gastrointestinal function. Number two, what else do I think you should do? You need to use some type of digestive enzyme support. You need to support digestion. Now there's a couple different concepts. The reason why we use this particular formula, because the protease that is in this particular product works in a different range of pH. Without getting real technical here, my pH of my intestinal wall versus yours versus someone that's using an acid blocking drug, all three of us could vary. Many of the digestive enzyme products containing protease only work in specific pH ranges. This works through a larger range of pH, meaning more of acidic environment to a more alkaline environment if you're on an acid blocking drug. 1 to 2 of those before meals. Facilitate your digestive process. Utilize tips for digestion. Chew. Don't drink a lot of fluids. Do not overeat. Spread out your meals. Eat smaller meals. Don't eat under highly stressful situations. Support your gastrointestinal functioning with GI Restore Digestive Essentials. Probiotic Essentials. If you have a digestive problem, you should be chronically using some probiotic essentials, multi-spectrum. We have 12 plus billion units in there to aid, first of all, the digestive and the eliminative process. Good bacteria resetting. I didn't even get into all the details, even how Candida and yeast overgrowth can be a trigger. Gallbladder disease can be a trigger for heartburn. So once again, if you just do some of these functional aspects, you reduce your need, long-term utilization and dependence upon pharmaceuticals. You facilitate the process, help the digestive dysfunction. That may not be for every single individual, but many, many, many Americans that suffer from heartburn, how do you spell relief? Is it just continuing to use acid blocking agents, or you need to support? Do you need to suppress or support your digestive capacities? Lastly, if you have some breakthrough symptoms, you can use something like this. It's a combination of DGL licorice, a calcium alginate that helps to coat the esophageal area. Many folks I work with tell you 10 to 15 minutes. If they have some symptoms, it can take away symptoms in 15 to 20 minutes. So that, I believe, is not, I don't believe you use that on an ongoing basis just to mask your symptoms. I'm all about improving your digestive dysfunction. Use that in a pinch when you've had some difficult situations. But the overall construct is, does that mean you never use an acid blocker again? Does that never mean that you use ranitidine or cimetidine or one of the over-the-counter agents or even some of the prescriptive, more powerful drugs, there may be a point in time where you have to. There might be specific days that have been very difficult, either stress-wise or whatever, that you may still have to use them. But over the long haul, one of your goals should be to reduce your dependence on those pharmaceuticals, improve your digestive capacities, which is some of the tools that we've gone over here today, and spell your own relief as opposed to having nothing but a suppression, in essence, of your symptoms. Thanks for tuning in and listening to our little video presentation today. We have more to come. Stay tuned. God bless you. Thanks for listening.